Hi. There are so many great books about happiness at work, and in this video, I want to talk about one of my favorite categories of book, which is the case story. A book that dives deep into one great organization and shares their story and what they've done to create a really good workplace. And I have picked five of my favorites in this category, so let's do it. And I want to start with this book, Nuts by Jackie and Kevin Freiberg, which is about Southwest Airlines. I want to start with this one because it's one of the first case stories I ever read, and because it completely blew my mind. I might have had a notion that, happiness at work is for fancy companies like Google, or it's for smaller companies where everybody knows each other. But this book showed me that you can do it in a huge company with tens of thousands of employees, and you can do it in a really tough, competitive, stressful industry like an airline. The book is jam-packed with practical tips on how they run their organization, how they lead people, how they hire people, how they train them. And it's so practical and useful, most of what they do, and so many great stories. One of my favorites is how they handle customers who always complain. And there's a story in here about a woman who flies Southwest all the time, but also complains all the time. Every time she's flown, they'll get her sternly worded letter about all the things she did not appreciate. And apparently, finally, one of the letters makes its way all the way up to Herb Kelleher, who was president at the time, and he just writes back, like one sentence: "Dear Mrs. Smith, we will miss you. Love, Herb." I thought that was great. I think it's a great book to read. It's also an interesting book to read because I'm honestly not sure how great of a workplace Southwest Airlines is these days. The two main sort of proponents for the culture they had at the time, Colleen Barrett, their CEO, and Herb Kelleher, the president, are no longer there. And from what I can tell, the culture hasn't quite been the same since. And that is a sort of a hallmark of many of these business case stories, is that a company is not great maybe forever. Maybe this is a snapshot of what made them great at one time, and maybe they've since lost it. So remember that whenever you read some of these case stories, is that this might not be the truth forever, but nevertheless, you can still take a lot away and learn a lot from those stories. And Southwest Airlines did some amazing things. The second book I want to mention is Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh, which is about Zappos, the company that he ran. Again, so practical, down to earth, very level-headed stuff on how they train, how they hire, how they promote, how they do everything, and how they created this organization. And in this case, I happen to know that it's not just a story, it's not just in a book, because I've been there. I've actually visited Zappos 3 or 4 times and talked to people who work there, and really gotten a sense of how great this organization is. One of my favorite stories was talking to one of their people who said, every morning when I drive into Zappos, I drive into the parking garage, I pull into a parking space, I stop my car, and I'm like, now I can relax. In many workplaces, people are like the opposite. They can relax once they drive out of the parking lot. But Zappos is just a great workplace. You can just feel the energy when you walk through the offices. It's also a bit of a tragic story because, of course, Tony Hsieh died not too long ago. And I think this proves that you don't really need to be seriously happy yourself in order to create happiness for your workplace, your organization. You don't need to be the most enthusiastic, bubbly, naturally happy person. And Tony Hsieh, I don't think, was that. But he still managed to create an organization, to create a workplace that's created a lot of happiness for both the employees and for the customers. And that's why this book is such a great read. I think my favorite thing about Zappos must be how they pay people to quit. Yes, they do. New employees get the offer. If we know Zappos is not for everybody, if you'd rather quit now, we will pay you $3,000 and you can quit. And they obviously do this for 2 reasons. First of all, if you're not completely sure about working for Zappos, they don't really want you there, and it's faster, cheaper, and easier if you leave sooner. And secondly, if you turn down the offer, you have just invested $3,000 in your future with the Zappos, and you're now a partner. You're now invested in making this work. I think that is such a wonderful, wonderful hack, and something I haven't really seen other companies do. And this book by my friend Rich Sheridan is amazing. Joy Inc. About his company that he co-founded, a tech company in Ann Arbor, Michigan, called Menlo Innovations. I've also been there. I spent a whole day there a few years ago, and again felt the energy and saw people working well together. This is a company on the smaller side, 50 people at the time. And I think it's just great just how creative, how groundbreaking they've been in coming up with a great culture that works for them and works for their clients. Perhaps the most groundbreaking thing they do is how they hire. There's a whole section in the book on what they call extreme hiring, extreme recruitment, which is this really interesting, fast-paced, collaborative process where they involve coworkers in hiring new employees. And they do it very fast. They can do it, scale the organization up very quickly. It's such a smart tool for how they do this. But there are sections in there on every aspect of the business, and I highly urge you to read it. This book is amazing, and Menlo Innovations is so cool. We also have a webinar with Rich Sheridan, and I'll put a link in the description so you can hear it from himself why they're awesome. So when you think of the military, you probably don't think about an open, inclusive leadership style, but that's where you would be wrong, and this book proves it. Turn the Ship Around by my friend David Marquet is an amazing book. It's such a great story. Some business books can be really dry and sort of hard to read. This one honestly reads like a thriller. It's more exciting than any spy novel. And I read it just pretty much in one go when I read it the first time. So David became the captain of a nuclear submarine called the USS Santa Fe, which was very, very poorly rated, not performing well at all. He became the captain of that one because the previous captain just quit, couldn't say it anymore. And he came in and decided to implement a completely new leadership style that was bottom up instead of top down. In one of my favorite phrases, he says that he wanted to create a system where decision power flowed down to the people with information instead of information flowing up to the people with decision power. So giving people much more freedom to be involved and make decisions. And it completely worked. And in 1 year, he turned the submarine around to becoming the best performing submarine in the U.S. Navy. And you got to, when I read this book, I was like, if this can work on a nuclear submarine, which is, highly complicated, highly technical, with incredibly high standards for performance, then this kind of open leadership can work anywhere. And that's why this book is such a great example. We arranged a conference a few years ago where David came and spoke about his experiences on the submarine. I'll put a link in the description of the video so you can hear him talk about it as well. But this book, simply amazing. And then finally, another story about freedom, but in a completely different setting. This is Let My People Go Surfing by Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, a company that makes outdoor wear, sportswear, mountain climbing gear, that kind of thing. And again, he talks about setting people free to do great work instead of micromanaging them. And there are, again, so many great examples of that. In the book, my favorite example is probably their surf rule, which is also what the book is named for. Apparently, their offices are in California, close to the beach, and the rule is that if there are good waves, if the surf is good, you can drop whatever you're doing and go surfing. You're allowed to go out and leave any meeting, whatever you're doing, and go surfing instead. They even have surfboards for you to use, and I think that's such a great way to show that they trust people to take responsibility for their own work, for their own time, for their own situation. The other huge aspect of Patagonia is their commitment to a cause. I think any workplace that wants to be a good workplace needs to have a purpose. There needs to be a higher meaning beyond just profits or growth for the company. Saying that this company's goal is 1.8% fiscal growth in the next quarter. Is that seriously, is that going to inspire anybody? Is that going to motivate anybody? Probably not. But if you can devote your company to something that will actually make the world better, then that can really motivate the people who work there. And that's what they do. They have dedicated the company to improving the environment. And they do that in so many ways. Every year, they donate 1% of profits or 10% of revenues, whichever is higher, to environmental causes. They have pioneered environmentally safe production, including, for instance, organic cotton, which was not really a thing. And they also involve their employees and even their customers in environmental agency and environmental causes. For instance, you can, if you have run an environmental NGO, you can apply and use the local Patagonia store for meetings or events and have them there. If you're a Patagonia employee, you can take time off and go work for an environmental NGO or agency. And I think that is such a brilliant attitude to have this cause that you're working for and set your employees free in their efforts to make that happen. That's why this book is so great. Also a great read. So these are 5 of my absolute favorite case stories that deal with a specific company. What's yours? Do you have a favorite? Write a comment. I'd love to hear what book has really inspired you, what company you are really inspired by. And again, there are links to each of the books that I mentioned in the description for this video. So happy reading.